Welcome everyone to this webinar for the Youth Asset Report of Dickinson and Iron Counties. My name is Chad Mager and I work for GLCYD, and I'll be your host today. So just as a little bit of housekeeping as we go along, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, there is a question box. Feel free to use that through any time throughout the webinar, and I will be sure to kind of interject and make sure those questions get answered at the right time. So feel free to ask any questions or clarifications you might need. A little bit about who we are as GLCYD, so you know kind of a little bit about us, is that we are a nonprofit who helps UP communities by building a healthy youth environment. A couple of the ways we do that is we promote a healthy youth development that focuses on the strengths of young people. And there's many different ways that we go about doing that, which includes holding youth summits, some leadership training, working with nonprofits and municipalities to make sure that the youth agenda is on the forefront of people's mind as we make decisions and going about our work. And the second way that we really help that is by creating a very strong nonprofit community by offering technical assistance, consulting to help nonprofits be stronger and more effective and more efficient, because we believe a strong nonprofit community makes a stronger community that in which our youth can thrive. So that's a little bit about GLCYD. And now I'd like to introduce my coworker, who is a field associate here with GLCYD, and her name is Becky Nord. And she'll be the one sharing with you today the data and some of the things we discovered from this latest asset report. So I'll turn it over to Becky.
Thank you, Chad. So what we're going to be looking at today are the results from a couple surveys that were taken in Dickinson and Iron County. One of those is the Profiles of Student Life, Attitudes and Behavior survey that comes from the Search Institute. This survey measures the levels of assets, the 40 developmental assets that are in an area. In Dickinson and Iron County, we've taken this survey in 1997, 2002, 2006, and now in the fall of 2015. So after getting all of the results from this survey back from the schools in the Dickinson Iron area that took it, which included all the schools in the ISD, we are able to share the results with you and have some conversation about it. So developmental assets. We like to view them as a framework to look at where our students are doing well and where they need some support. It gives us a lot of information when we look at how many assets a student has and what individual assets they're doing well in out of the 40. So what we're finding is the more assets they have, the more likely they're to grow up competent, caring, and healthy, and they're less likely to partake in any kind of risky behavior. And we'll see some breakdown of that later. So the assets are really protective kind of indicators: a caring neighborhood, a safe environment, school boundaries, family boundaries, those sorts of things. So what we found in our survey is there's really no magic number of assets a student should have. What we found in Dickinson and Iron County, taking a look at the pie chart, students who showed 0 to 10 assets, so the least number of assets, we had 7% of our students fall within that category. 11 to 20 assets, 37%. Moving on up, 40% for students who we found had 21 to 30 assets. And then the most assets, 31 to 40, 16% of our students had those. So that's good news. That number is growing, and we'll take a look at that later, how the average number of assets a student has grown with each of these reports that we go ahead and do. So why is it important to have assets? Well, when we take a look at the students who have the most number of assets, in the orange here on the bar graph, 31 to 40 assets, they do best in these categories. They show the best results for these thriving indicators. Things like succeeding in school, maintaining good health, delaying gratification, and resisting danger. Students who have the least number of assets, the dark blue, the 0 to 10, don't fare as well in these categories. And this is shown time and time again. So it's important for us to see the more assets we have, that the students have, the more in our community they are reporting more of these thriving indicators. And on the flip side of it, it's important for our children to have assets because of these high risk indicators. So when we see in the dark blue on this bar graph, 0 to 10 assets, students who have fewer assets show more depression, school truancy, and violence, according to the surveys that we're doing, according to this survey. And there is a really big drop. It's significant, and you can notice it between students who have 0 to 10 assets and even the next category. If you're having 11 to 20 assets, if you're closer to having about half of the assets, you're doing much better. Those numbers, especially noticeable in school truancy, how we go from 37% to 13%. And the more assets they have, the fewer of those indicators they're showing. So these are things that we've pulled out of the report, out of the results, that we feel are really significant. So it speaks to how important it is for us to build assets in our community and have students who can really thrive. And we'll look at some specific assets and what those numbers are as we move along here. So the average number of assets in the last surveys that we've been taking, we can definitely see the numbers going up. In 1997, the average number of assets a student had was 17.6, and as we move along, we have this little jump now in 2015 that the average number of assets a student has is 21.8, which I think is a really great thing to celebrate. We can say that our students on average have more than half the assets. So that's exciting. So taking a look at assets, they're broken basically down into two categories: external assets and internal assets. So external includes relationships and opportunities that a student may experience, things in their family, in their schools, in their community. It's things that are provided to the youth. Internal assets, the other half of the group, are more like competencies or values that youth develop internally and that guide their behaviors and their choices. These are things that we can really help develop. What came out of the survey this last fall was that our most common assets in Dickinson and Iron County include positive peer influence at 80%, which is great. So 80% of our students feel that they have positive peer influence in their life. And actually, this was new to the list this year. It hadn't been on the list of most common assets in the past, so we think that's wonderful. And the other ones here, 79% for achievement, motivation, family support, integrity. These are their most common assets. Looking at the least common assets that we saw come out of this report, once again, creative activities for students is at 15%, and that was actually down from 17% from the last survey. Reading for pleasure was on the list again and down a couple percent from the last survey. Community values youth came in at 29%. So thinking that a student's perception of whether their community values them or not, you could say 1 in 3 students feels like they're valued in their community. And I think that some of us adults may have a different view of that. We feel as though we value youth and they're important to us. And so this is their perception. So the discussion is then, how do we change their perception of whether their community values them? And we can do that in probably a lot of different ways. Some of those things we'll talk about. It's about having youth at the table when decisions are being made. So inviting youth to sit on a community board, inviting youth to meetings when you're planning something that concerns them to get their opinion and to show that it matters are all really important ways we can show them that their community values them. The good news is a lot of our assets are on the rise. So out of these, there are 14 assets listed here out of the 40 that have risen 10% or more each from our last survey. So parent involvement in schooling, equality and social justice, and caring, honesty, all of these have really risen. And the Search Institute will tell us that if an asset rises 5% or more, that's kind of the benchmark where, yes, that asset is going up. And we've had some of those from the last survey, but these have all risen quite a bit, which we're very excited about. The other part of this report and the surveys that we did included our Sidebar Survey. So that's developed locally in partnership. GLCYD and the Dickinson Iron Healthy Youth Coalition worked to put together these 36 questions. We felt it was information that may be difficult to obtain elsewhere. So it's more specific to our community, and we'll have a chance to look at some of that. This information is really useful for grant writing. It's all of the results that we've gotten from the Sidebar Survey, but also from the Search Survey, are all broken down by male and female and by grades. So 7th, 9th, and 11th grades that took the survey, they're all broken down. So we can see specifically when we look at a piece of information what the total percent is, and then broken down male, female, and by grades, which is really, it's interesting and it's good information to have, we feel. Part of the Sidebar Survey asks about internet use and safety. And what we found was over half of the students are spending 3 or more hours online every day not doing homework. So aside from what they use to do research or submit homework online, they are spending 3 or more hours online every day. Along with that, 83% of the students would say their parents monitor their internet use a little bit or not at all. So that's a really big number of youth who have access to the internet with everything they have and do not have a lot of oversight on that. When we look at the question about cyberbullying with our students, 1 in 4 has received a message in the last year that was specifically meant to harass, threaten, or embarrass them. So they have access to a lot going on, a lot coming in that they need to deal with. And 1 out of every 4 females has been asked to meet someone that they've met online, someone they do not know but have been asked to meet. So those are scary numbers, looking at some of that when we look back to how closely their internet use is monitored. What we did find in the Sidebar Survey that I personally thought was very positive, under substance abuse, 93% came back as they have never used prescription drugs to get high. 69% of students do not drink alcohol, and 90% of students do not smoke. These are the numbers that we're finding coming back. There is great measures taken by the Search Institute, and when we do the Sidebar Survey, to preserve anonymity of students. So anything that they answer, the surveys are not marked with their name or any numbers that can be connected back to them. When the results come back, if a class is very small, the information will not be broken down by male or female in a class, and that is so if a school gets its results, they won't necessarily be able to pinpoint which student answered which question. So preserving their anonymity is part of getting the students to answer all of these questions in the survey honestly and hoping that these numbers are true. Another question we ask is about if a student feels it is wrong or very wrong for someone their age to be using alcohol, cigarettes, or marijuana. And what we found was in seventh grade, 94% of students felt that it was wrong to use alcohol, 97% cigarettes, and 96% marijuana. And those numbers um, go down a little bit for 11th grade, but we find that more students feel that it is wrong or very wrong to use cigarettes than it is to smoke marijuana. And so that's a conversation we've been having in some of the presentations we've been doing about the asset survey and what those results mean. So what do we need to make an impact on the assets in our community? Well, there's a couple things we feel are important, that we need to be intentional and consistent and creative about youth development. So when a group gets together and talks about what they can do for youth, how can we intentionally be building assets? And we feel like being consistent is one reason that the numbers have grown with average number of assets going up. We feel as though programs we have in place and things going on in the community, like the Healthy Youth Coalition and their Asset Summit, the youth summit that they do every fall for the last 17 years, something like that where it is consistent every year. Students are there, they're looking at the results of these surveys, they're planning projects that they can do within their school on targeting on certain assets to try and grow. And we feel the consistency of doing those sorts of things every year and being creative in how we look at assets and build assets. We have some different things going on in our community. We have some leadership trainings that are going on with the Northern Lights YMCA and the Great Start program. They're doing leadership trainings in a couple different high schools. They did a couple last year and they'll be continuing to do that. The North Dickinson Student Council puts on a leadership conference every year for the last 5 years, and that is something where all students are invited. It's completely student-led, and we're working on different types of assets. And we feel that consistency of doing that every year and the creativeness on how we tackle building assets is really what is working to try and bring the assets up in our community. So the question about building assets really is, who is responsible for building assets in a community? Is it things that should come from the parents? Is it things that should come from the school or other organizations? And the truth is, individuals can make a difference and have a big impact on building assets. So building assets really is up to all of us. It can be you that's the asset builder. So individually, looking at things like when we talked about creative activities being something that comes in low on our survey, how can you as an individual help to expose the youth to something to be creative, whether that's if you have a hobby and you'd like to share that with your local community or school or group, and really making a connection. Connections are a really big thing in asset building. They're very important. So individually making connections with the youth that are around you. Looking at where your circle can have the biggest impact, if it's a civic group that you belong to or a faith-based organization, then where can you have the biggest impact there? Can you be coming up with programs? Can you be doing projects with the youth in your community, inviting them to be part of what you're doing and really talking about it within your circle? And then where communities can have the biggest impact. How can we coordinate resources? How organizations can connect with youth and really have a systematic impact. So, with our vision being that all youth have the opportunity to thrive, where can we individually and as a part of a bigger community have that biggest impact? And I know there are a lot of things going on in Dickinson and Iron counties that people can have an impact. Looking at reading for pleasure being on the least common assets found. Every summer, the Dickinson County Library is doing their summer reading program. And if that's something you're interested in, something you feel you can help with, the library through their Friends of the Library group, which you can find on their website, going through something like that and being able to volunteer to help with the summer reading program or any other events they have going on at the library. Really, there's a lot going on that people can get involved in. Individually also, we had a conversation at a presentation we did about this report, and a gentleman was saying how difficult it is sometimes to get youth involved when you do have a program or a project, that a lot of times technology can take over. He was feeling like students would rather be sitting at home playing video games or on their phone rather than getting out and getting involved in something. So how can we fix that? I think individually, when there's something happening, it really is about if youth aren't involved, looking at what their barriers might be. Is it something that there's a transportation barrier that a youth maybe cannot get to where they want to go, and how can we help with that by organizing rides with different people, um, and really making that personal connection, giving them the reason to look up from their phone, calling them by name, looking them in the eye, and really the personal connections can start to really build those assets and moving from there. So looking at if anybody has any questions about our report and what we found in these surveys that we haven't covered, you can go ahead and type those in, and we'll try and get to everything that we want to talk about. What we did find in the report from Search, talking about thriving behaviors, one that was very positive, we felt, in the category of helping others. The definition of this asset: a student helps friends or neighbors 1 or more hours a week. And we found that 82% of our students are answering that question and fill that category of helping others, which we think is really, really wonderful. Another category we were pleased with was students exhibiting leadership. So they've been a leader of a group or an organization in the last year. And we had 63% of our students that we feel are exhibiting leadership in that way. And once again, I feel that it says something directly to people who are willing to be an advisor for a group and lead a group and put students in that leadership position, which is so important, to give them that responsibility and to give them the freedom to really make decisions and go ahead and lead a group. Looking also at the Search survey, and talking about substance use, we went over some of those numbers earlier. What we are finding is when we look at the alcohol category, students who used alcohol once or more in the last month, 19% was the number that came across in the results, or the number of students who got drunk once or more in the last 2 weeks, we were looking at 11%. So we feel those numbers are fairly low. Once again, students smoking cigarettes over the last month, we've had a total of 6%. So we're happy to see some of those. One that was more alarming that we looked at was the category about driving and using alcohol. So asking students who rode with someone, a driver who had been drinking once or more in the last month, we had a total of 31% of students who say they rode with someone who had been drinking. So that is a little more alarming and something that I know is a kind of a targeted asset where communities and organizations are looking at how they can help those numbers. So looking at the Sidebar Survey, what we were happy to see was students are looking toward their post-secondary plans, kind of what they're going to do after high school. And we find that full-time, someone who says they're planning on being a full-time student is 34%. And that's mixed with some students who will be planning on being employed while they're going to school part-time at 19%. What our results from the Sidebar Survey are showing is that students who are undecided, those numbers are fairly low. And how important do they think a post-high school education is to having the kind of life they want as an adult? We find 54% of them are saying it's very important. So we're excited to see that students want to move ahead with their education, in our area. All of these results that were put into the community report, that community report is available for anybody who would like to see what the specific numbers are. And any numbers that you find are not in the report that you'd like specifically, like from the Sidebar Survey, go ahead and contact us, because we can give a breakdown of information and some of the results and help walk you through it.
Becky, I have a question.
Yes.
Not to put you on the spot, but you were talking about the percentage of youth that realize higher education is good for their future careers. Do you know how that has changed since the last survey?
That's a good question. Actually, this is the first time in Dickinson and Iron County we've taken the Sidebar Survey. So that's the first time that question was asked. So the others, the search survey that we're measuring against what we've done in the past, we can see where that goes up or down. With the Sidebar Survey, it was the first year we've asked that question, so we can't compare it to what we've done before, but we were excited to see some of those positive numbers come out.
Right. It will really be interesting to see the next time you do it with having a college access network there.
Absolutely, and we're excited about what the College Access Network is planning, and at GLCYD we're trying to be part of that and see how we can help support that, and hopefully some of this information can help us see where it's going. So we're excited about that. Mm-hmm. So really looking at how the assets have gone up, we are excited about how the results came back from this survey. The last time we did the survey in 2006 in Dickinson and Iron County, we surveyed a greater number of students, because we surveyed 6th through 12th grades. And this year, or this past time, the survey was with just 7th, 9th, and 11th grades. Part of that is the money to do the survey. GLCYD had supported this survey in Dickinson and Iron County and were able to fund part of the survey. The individual schools who get their individual reports, they pay for that part of it, and then this aggregate information of all throughout Dickinson and Iron County we were able to put into the report. Their individual school reports are more for the schools to work within their school to see where they can really make a difference.
Becky, why don't you speak a little bit to the Healthy Youth Coalition for people that are online that aren't familiar with it, and the types of activities that you do. I think that's a big part of what you were talking about, the consistency and helping to have these assets be raised.
Right, and the Healthy Youth Coalition, they're a group who met and got started in 1997 after this first survey was done in Dickinson and Iron County. So after doing the survey, the interest in asset building basically led to the formation of the Health Youth Coalition. So it includes members from all different organizations in the community, the Dickinson Iron Health Department, and the ISD. And so really their approach is to view youth as the solution and not the problem. So promoting this asset building, and it has been consistent in many areas throughout Dickinson and Iron County, really we feel is what's making the difference for these assets to go up. Something consistent like the Youth Summit that I mentioned. GLCYD is helping support that now these last years, but it's been going on for 17 years. So what we see is when students come together and they're given that opportunity and that power to look at survey results and say, we want to work on this survey. We're going to target, or this asset, we're going to target this asset. How can we make that better in our school? And they have the time to sit and plan a project and go implement it in their school. And the amount of work that's being done by the Health Youth Coalition to make sure that summit happens every year is really something that we feel has made a difference. When you're looking back 17 years, I mean, potentially we're looking at students who were in high school at the time and have been a product and involved in some of this asset building, who now potentially have a 7th grader that we're now surveying. So with the consistency year after year and the time, seeing those assets go up really speaks to that, what the Healthy Youth Coalition has been able to do in Dickinson and Iron County. Absolutely. So if there's any other questions on anything, and also any ideas that people have to really work to build assets in their community, we're always willing to hear. And I think the biggest thing that I see working in Dickinson and Iron County now is the collaboration. You have organizations that are working on multiple groups, people who are on the Dickinson County Community Collaborative, also the Iron County Community Collaborative, the Great Start, the Health Youth Coalition, all of these members from organizations that are really taking the time to find out what's going on in their community and supporting each other and figuring out how to work together has really been something that I've seen that I think is really positive, that people are making the effort to collaborate and work together.
Well, we want to make sure we give everyone a chance to ask any questions they might have. So far, we haven't had any submitted. So if you want to make sure you get any last questions in for Becky, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. So talking about building assets and some simple ideas, sometimes we do turn to families and schools to build those assets, and we really want to let everyone know you can be an asset builder. So adults, building a caring relationship with a youth, someone in your life, and really making that connection, being a positive role model. Things like learning the names of the children and the teens who live near you, work in shops that you frequent, and greeting them by name. Those are really individual things we can do as adults. And as far as organizations go, involving youth in their leadership and programming, like we talked about before, developing ways youth can volunteer and serve others. A lot of young people are willing to get out there and do the work and help in their communities, and we need to have those opportunities available. So how can we do that? How can we have the opportunity and get the connection so the youth feels like they are really being part of their community? Also recognizing youth for the service that they do is important, and making sure that you're thanking them and really letting them know how much you appreciate their help with things. I think that goes back to the asset of the community valuing the youth, which is, their perception of whether they're valued and how can we bring that asset up. So there's a lot of simple things we can do beyond a big program or a big project. There are a lot of things going on. Another thing GLCYD has been doing for as far as positive youth development has been working on the Natural Helpers program. Natural Helpers is a peer mentoring program. It's something that we've been able to do training for specifically at North Dickinson School, where they now have a Natural Helpers group. And when there's any kind of interest in positive youth development, we have at GLCYD different ideas, programs, and things that we offer, projects that we can help, you know, you get involved with the youth in your community and to really build assets. So those are some of the things that we've been doing in the community.
All right, Becky. Well, no one submitted a question, so it looks like unless you have some more final thoughts, there's no questions from the attendees at this time.
Well, I would like to absolutely say thank you for joining us. Also, if you have questions that arise later, you'd like any additional information, or you have ideas or examples of asset building in your community, please feel free to contact me. These are all things that we'd like to share, and so we look forward to working with organizations to talk about this. So share what you have. We're excited to see how the youth are thriving, and we'd like to know where they need extra support and how can we collaborate and how can we help them together to get what they need. So I appreciate everybody joining us today, and once again, feel free to contact me at any time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.